On today's episode of the McCann Dogs Podcast,
we can also work on helping our dogs understand that touch from us is a good thing.
Yes.
And this is important to do when your puppies are really young because we want to condition them to just be cooperative and to let us do the things we need to do.
And now, Instructor Shannon.
Welcome back to the McCann Dogs Podcast. It is season 4, and we are in the studio today, and our plan today is to talk about, so you got a puppy, now what? Talk about some of the things that we just automatically do and some of the things we automatically train and some of the things we automatically think about and consider when we have a new puppy coming into our home. I am Instructor Shannon, and I am joined today by the infamous Instructor Swanny.
Hi, everyone.
It is so nice to be here for the McCann Dogs Podcast. And I'm excited about this topic because I think that there's a lot of really nuanced behaviors in dogs and in dog training and some of the things that we just sort of automatically start doing right off the bat with our puppies that make a huge difference and a huge impact as they continue to learn and grow. And I thought today would be a good time to gather some of those things and talk about the why behind them and talk about where to apply them, you know, all the pertinent information. Right. So what happens after you get the puppy? There's some things that I think are pretty obvious. You know, people know nowadays that they're going to need to house train their puppy. They're going to need to crate train their puppy. So we're going to gloss over the bigger things today in lieu of talking about some of the more nuanced behaviors. So when this topic springs to mind, what is something that pops out in your head as a thing that you know you will do with every single puppy that you have, regardless of any other things to consider in there? This is one thing that you know you're always going to work with your new puppy on.
Well, I want my voice to mean something to the puppy.
I like that.
So I'm going to immediately start teaching the puppy that my voice is something good and it's something to listen to. I want a dog who is an active listener, and that starts in puppyhood.
I love that. So what are some of the things that you do for that? Is this like pairing good, positive things like food, touch, that sort of thing?
Right,
Tell us what your process is with that.
Well, one of the first things I want to teach my puppy is what I've chosen to name them. So I want them to learn their name.
I guess what?
Yeah. What?
That's on my list.
Oh,
teaching a response to
the name.
Teaching them what their name is. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this because people are probably saying, does he really need to learn his name or she? Do they really need to learn their name? So talk a little bit more about that.
Well, naming a puppy is something we all do. And we sort of all just often think, well, he'll know his name because that's his name. But they don't. It's just an odd sound now that we're making.
Yeah.
But I want that name to have a lot of meaning to the dog and the dog to have a very positive reaction to it. So right off the bat, once I've chosen my puppy's name, I'm going to, call the puppy's name while he's sitting right in front of me, nice and close, and I have his rapt attention, and I'm going to say his name, say my dog's name was Spot. Spot, give a treat. Spot, give a treat. Spot, give a treat. And my puppy's, or it doesn't have to be a treat, it could be his kibble, and the puppy's going to say, I don't know what that spot thing means, but I like that. I when I hear that word spot, good things happen.
I love it.
And so as things go on, the dog has that association with that word spot. It means something good is about to happen from the people. Let's give the people my attention when I hear that name or that word.
Yeah.
Because they don't know anything about names.
No, they definitely don't. And to put this in perspective, a lot of times it's confusing. Like we assume that they're going to know their name. We assume that they're going to have some basic understanding of how to live in a human world, but truly nothing could be further from the truth. Right. This is very foreign to them. They're creatures that rely on instinct quite a lot of the time. So that instinct is what's going to fill in those holes. And I always try to explain to people, if you take this down to the lowest level, if you don't see a dog interpreting something or doing something with other dogs, which we never see a dog saying another dog's name. This just doesn't happen. And that sounds really silly to say out loud, but it's a good way of keeping things in perspective. If we come to these things that we know never happen naturally for a dog, chances are we need to teach it.
Right, exactly.
We need to give them some guidance and show them how to understand things like their name or what the expectation is, rather, when they hear that word.
When they hear that word, yes. They're animals. I think we forget that sometimes, that they're a little animal. They're not a little human we're bringing in.
Yeah.
And they think differently. They react differently. Everything is different in their thought process than with a human.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just, it's a nice little way to sort of take it down to a level that should make sense for everybody. If you don't see it happening naturally, chances are you're going to need to spend some time teaching that behavior because, as Swanny says, it's an animal and they think differently and they do things differently. So take some time to teach them that their name is a wonderful thing and that will serve you for the rest of their lives. And this is something you start when? How early do you start this?
The moment I bring them home.
Perfect. You walk in the door and you just start name and treat. No, I'm just kidding. I'm being silly. But
well, absolutely. It might start in the car. If the puppy, if I'm lucky enough to have someone driving with me, maybe I can sit in the back seat and I have the puppy in their crate.
This is intense.
Right?
You're even.
Well, no, I'm not going to do. No, but I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to be saying, like I'm going to, Spot,
It's
hi,
good
Spot,
dedication.
hello, Spot, like you're Spot. Like I'm already, some of the first things that the puppy's going to hear is my voice in a pleasant way, saying their name.
Perfect. And
now that doesn't mean I don't change their name 1,000 times.
Me too.
No, I've only done that. Oh, with 2 dogs. With 2 dogs, I've changed the name. One dog got, I think, 3 names before I settled on the right one. And
which dog?
Gavin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Gavin had a few names. And Atari, what were we going to? No, actually, Atari went to Atari right away. No, it was,
That was Ty picked up. That your son picked that name out, right?
Atari would, no. So I was thinking, her when we got her from the breeder, her name was Lynx. But we switched it in the car to Atari.
Gotcha.
But Gavin, because his first name fell through, and then I tried out a few other ones, and finally settled on Gavin.
Yeah, sometimes. So I have these lists of names that'll sort of come to me as I'm doing whatever. Oh, I need to add that to my puppy name list. That would be a great name. And it usually has some sort of tie-in with the registered name somehow. And it's an important part of the process for me. So I usually will have an idea of what I'm naming that dog when I bring them home. But sometimes once you get to know the puppy, it's like, oh, that's just not the right name for this puppy. I need to think on it a little bit more. So sometimes things can change, but you are absolutely bang on the money if you take some time to just start to condition the dog to responding to your voice, meaning that good things are going to happen.
Right.
So yeah, I'm the same. As soon as I bring my puppy home, response to name is one of the first things I start to teach. I want to be able to call their name in any situation and have them turn and orient back to me very quickly.
Right. Yes.
We actually, we spend a lot of time thinking about response to name. It's one of the big commands that we talk about at McCann's, and that comes along with making sure that we don't sour their name. So doing things like scolding them with their name. What do you do when you want to just have cute, wonderful little conversation with your dog because they're so lovely?
I might pick a little nickname to use. Yes.
But I do the same thing.
Yeah, even on the street sometimes you're out walking and someone says, "Oh, what's your dog's name?" And I always hesitate to call out their name to tell the person because I don't want to say the name and have the person, and have the dog kind of look at me and me not recognize it. So people must think I'm odd because I remember Atari's name was, some people didn't catch it right away if they weren't familiar with, I think everyone knows the video game system, but some people didn't. Yeah. Especially sometimes, or someone's hard of hearing.
Younger people probably wouldn't these days.
Right, it's true, yes. Yeah. But I remember like people would say, "Oh, what's her name?" And I would go, "Atari." And when Atari would look at me, "Yay, you know your name, don't you? What a good girl." Because I'm always thinking in the back of my head, I want to reinforce her name.
Yeah.
So, so even when I just say it to a person, I expect her to go, "I heard Christine say my name. I better look. And I'm going to, good girl, you know your name, don't you? Hooray." But, and the person probably, thinks, "Oh, that's good." But, in my brain, I am reinforcing the dog's name.
Absolutely. And that's so important. And we had a student recently who had a dog. The dog's name was Bowie. Was this your story that you told me? Or I can't remember, but I'll tell the story.
Bowie is a good name, though.
Yes. Bowie is definitely
I had a dog named Bowie eons ago.
So, so we had a student recently with a dog named Bowie, and she had kids and didn't want the kids overusing the dog's name because she was working hard at teaching a good response to names. So this is genius.
Did she get the kids to call him David?
She said, exactly. She said to the kids, "You know what? When we're just playing and having fun, you're going to use his first name. So they called him David when they just didn't expect anything from him.
Yeah.
And then they used Bowie as his actual name that you want recognition of and response. I thought it was you that told me that story.
No, it wasn't. No,
what a
it
great
wasn't.
story.
I know.
And a
I
great
love that
idea.
story. Yes, and
Especially with kids.
and especially with who wouldn't want to be named after David Bowie.
Yes, it's true.
Oh my gosh,
Absolutely.
yes.
All right, so response to name, really important on the wish list of things to do. Another thing that I have on my list here that is something that is often underestimated in terms of its value is taking the collar. This is something that I start right from the get-go as well. And a lot of the times it's out of necessity because a lot of times puppies won't necessarily have had a collar on before, or maybe they'll have had some rick-rack on, but nothing that it takes some getting used to, right? It would be like putting on a new pair of glasses, right? They just, it sits there and you feel it and you feel it and you feel it.
Right.
So with a puppy that might start fussing with their collar, I would often just reach in and just take the collar in order to sort of distract them from it because I don't want that to become a habit. I want them to forget the collar's even on there and not worry about it. So that's one way I start interacting with the collar, but I also make sure that I set out and do a whole bunch of work just showing my puppy some food, luring them in nice and close, and then reaching underneath their chin to take the collar. I don't want to come over their head because a lot of times that can be overwhelming for puppies.
Yes.
But I want my puppy right from day one to know that me touching their collar, me taking control of them is not anything they need to panic about.
Right.
And some puppies will get a little bit panicked when they suddenly can't move. You know, when you take a hold of their collar and they go, oh my goodness, I can't move, I can't back away, what do I do? If you let go at that point, what happens?
The puppy says, oh, I know how to make people let go of my collar. I panic, I shriek, I jump about. The people go, oh, and that's how you control people.
Yeah, and we don't ever want our dogs to learn that fighting us in any way, shape, or form gets them the win. We want them to learn that if they're unsure, they just defer to us and look for our guidance. So I don't ever want to get stuck in the situation where I'm just, you know, suddenly trying to take control of my puppy and I'm setting them off on a panic attack. So what I want to be able to do is start nice and early, doing some luring in, taking their collar, rewarding them for being calm as I hold the collar, and then giving them a nice clear, okay, as I let go of the collar and release them. And that is something that like throughout their whole life, that will be valuable. I mean, we see about 500 dogs a week come through our in-person programs. We have online and in-person programs available. You can check out mccanndogs.com for any information about that, or reach out to us by email, yourdog@mccanndogs.com. Or if you're looking for information about our online program, you can email onlinetraining@mccanndogs.com. And a lot of these skills are things that we work really, really hard on, both in person and online, so we can give you lots of coaching. But we see about 500 dogs come through our in-person programs in any given week. And for any life skills in-person graduation class, we see dogs learn the recall lickety split. They learn to turn off distractions with the training system that we use. They learn to turn off distractions. They learn to run to their handlers. They learn that it's a good thing to run to their handlers and get some cookies. But inevitably where there's some weakness is with taking the collar, because people underestimate the value of it. So these dogs come running in, they get the cookie, and then when the handler goes to take control, or maybe you've seen this at the park with some dog at the park, the handler goes to take control and the dog goes, oh, no, I don't want that control. I want another cookie, or I'm going to take off and, you know, do a little rabbit run and have some fun. So preemptively, we teach our students, as their dog comes in for the recall, to stand up tall. That helps the dog get into the sit position. And then part of our curriculum is working that sit at the end for control, and working on the dog holding that sit, reaching in, taking the collar, feeding, standing back up tall, playing with the clip on the leash, standing back up tall, and having the dog hold the sit for that entire time. And we continue to reward and continue to build value for it, but it's such an important piece of the puzzle. And right from day one, that's one of the things that I want my dogs to learn.
Right, yes.
And
because it's not just us that are going to take the puppy's collar.
You got it.
If they go to the vet's going to maybe take their collar, or the technician, if you have to put them in a boarding kennel. And, you know, all of us like to go on vacations without our dogs sometimes, so don't feel guilty about that. You know, the people that work at the kennel or your pet sitter is going to have to reach out. If your dog ever gets lost, I know one time I was trying to help catch a dog that had gotten loose in the park. And every time we outstretched our hands, That dog says, no, I know what that means. Something bad. You're about to take control of me and put me away. And it didn't have a good association. And like, I know if my dog was loose in the park, I think anybody could probably reach out their hand and the dog would say, oh, that means something good. I'll put my collar in their hand and they're going to give me a treat or some loving. Or so, yes.
It's interesting. I was actually thinking about this when I was coming up with today's podcast plan, and I was remembering my early days at McCann's and learning how to be an instructor and learning how to train dogs. And Deb McCann would tell a story about how one of her dogs, Wiz, she would put her hand out and the dog would come in sideways to shove her collar into Deb's hand. And I thought, like, that's really amazing. Like, how do I get to that point with my dog? And truly, it comes pretty easily when you build value for the thing you're asking your dog to do. So by the time I had practiced that skill for a couple of months and associated it with calm, hanging out with me, with food rewards coming, with all sorts of good things coming. This was with Quincy a long time ago, my first dog, my Rottweiler. And she learned this very quickly as well. As soon as I would reach in to take her collar, she'd lean in and let me and encourage me basically to take it because she knew good things were going to happen.
Right.
So.
Yes. And I think too, like a nervous dog will equate it with safety.
Yes.
Like, oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. I feel safe. My owner has me now. They have my collar. All is well. I'm safe.
Familiar gestures.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you think about that you teach right off the bat?
Right off the bat, I'm going to also teach them that I control their food resources toy resources. So I am, I am in control of all things good for the puppy. So the puppy looks at me like, wow, like Christine has everything for me. Why wouldn't I want to? The sun shines out of her head.
Exactly. Right out of the top of your head. It actually does. If you're watching us on the YouTube podcast channel, you will see that sun definitely shines right out of
Actually, I think it's just the light behind me, but
you're just such a happy person.
Oh, thank you.
The sun comes out of your head. But yeah, I love that. And I think that that's so valuable and so important. And if you want to know more about how to help your dog with understanding your leadership through controlling resources, we have lots of help on leadership on the podcast and on our YouTube channel as well. I also wanted to mention that you talked about going on vacation, and we have a great podcast to help you with all the planning that needs to be done for your dog, whether you're leaving them behind with someone that you trust or a boarding kennel, or whether you're bringing them with you. So have a look at the Vacation Planning McCann Dogs podcast for tips on that. And I love the resources thing. So another thing that I have on my list here, out and drop it.
Yes.
Teaching those things right off the bat. So why do you think that those are important commands to teach right off the bat?
Well, puppies explore the world with their mouths.
That they do.
And dogs are creatures of their mouth too. They don't have hands. Everything goes in their mouth.
I was going to make some really awful jokes there, but I think we'll continue on.
Right, yes. So it's just natural for an animal, any animal. All animals love to put things in their mouths.
Yes.
So it's not, even our toddlers, they're not animals, they're little people, but they put things in their mouths they shouldn't too.
I don't know. I feel like if I had a toddler, it might be some sort of an animal. I'm just not sure about it. But I digress.
So we want to teach them to give up things that they have in their mouth. And the reason being is that they could have something very dangerous in their mouth, and the mouth is a direct access to their stomach.
Yeah. That is an excellent point.
Right, yes.
Yeah, so if you ask any vet, they will probably tell you that one of the most performed surgeries outside of routine spay and neuter is foreign body extraction.
Yes.
Because dogs are scavengers, and as puppies especially, they like to pick up and have anything and everything in their mouth. And when they're babies, when they're very small, they're not strong, we can grab them, we can pry open their mouth, we can pull those things out. But if you are relying on that being the mode of communication for having anything taken out of their mouth, you are going to lose at some point. As soon as their jaw is strong enough, they are going to hunker down and say, no, you cannot have this.
Right.
And that, of course, is not acceptable. We want to do the opposite with our dogs. We want to teach them that us asking them to relinquish things or approaching while they're eating or whatever the case may be is actually a positive thing and nothing they need to worry about. So if you take those early days, and having tollers, sporting breeds especially, are incredibly reinforced by having things in their mouths. So it is just like a natural behavior for them, and for any puppy, of course, to want to pick up things. And the last thing we want to do is teach them that as we come forward for that thing, they should play catch me if you can, or try to possess that thing.
Or swallow it quicker.
Yes,
yes. I've seen... I remember Gavin, this was back when I was in my 20s, the Corgi. I remember I opened up a can of peanuts. And as I popped open the can, it was, all the peanuts went flying around the room.
Ooh.
And I remember Gavin snarfling up peanuts as fast as he could. And I remember, I'd run to get him to stop him, and he would just run to the next peanut. And he was just trying to get to all those peanuts as fast as he could.
Oh my
now,
goodness.
I was in my early 20s. I didn't have the dog training background. It would be a very different scenario now.
Yeah.
But it was, and I remember when he went to the bathroom after, it was mostly peanuts that came out. But I think
like a Clark bar or something.
Right, yeah. But I always remember all these, him just running to peanuts.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And it's quite an easy feat to teach an early out or drop it with our puppies, and to teach them to be cooperative with it. It is equally as easy, if not easier, to teach them to lack cooperation in that thing by doing the wrestling things out of their mouth, etc. Because then they learn that this prize that they have, they need to try to hold on to it. So
yes, I remember my high school boyfriend, they had a Dalmatian, and the Dalmatian stole my mitten.
Oh.
And then he went under a buffet.
Okay.
With the mitten. And I remember the parents actually said, "We're sorry, Christine, your mitten's gone now." And I'm like, "No, it's not." My parents, growing up with the dog training world. And I thought, no, I'm getting my mitten. And I remember sticking my head on the floor and looking under the buffet at this Dalmatian, and it's snarling and
oh goodness.
And I was very brave, because I remember I reached in and I think I took the dog's collar and grabbed the mitten out of its mouth. And I think the dog was shocked. I think that's what saved me. I think the dog was like, "What? A human is challenging me when I have something?" So I think the dog was a bit shocked, but I got my mitten back.
Goodness.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And you definitely don't want to be in that situation.
No, because I was very lucky, but I think I just surprised the dog because no one had challenged it before.
Interesting. Yeah. And these early lessons will serve you for life. If the dog learns that giving things up to you is no big deal, and it often is rewarding as well, that's going to follow for the entire life as you continue to build relationship and understanding with skills, etc. And then, of course, we have some skill that we can use. So now when the inevitable happens and the puppy runs for something that's exciting for them and grabs it, the thing that they shouldn't have, we can work with the commands that we've taught and with the out or the drop it skill that we've taught, so that they're not feeling defensive and they're not needing to go and hoard it in a corner or under a buffet somewhere. And we're not seeing that, the rest of that behavior come out.
Yes.
So definitely a good thing to teach early. Is there anything else that jumps to top of mind for you? I got a whole list.
Well, I put a little house line on the puppy.
Oh, love that.
So yeah, right away I attach something to its collar so that I have a handy handle that I can always step on.
A handy handle.
A handy handle.
That
yes.
is handy.
Right, because it's very hard to catch a little puppy.
Yeah, tell us how you use the house line. Give a little brief description for people who are
Well,
new
the house line is basically a piece of rope, maybe similar to a clothesline. That's what I tend to use. And I just either...
Sort of like a parachute cord type of material,
yes.
something light.
Right, something light. Yeah. And the puppy drags it around the house so that if my puppy does something and I need to interrupt, instead of trying to get a puppy, I just step on the house line. And the puppy goes, "Wow, they don't even have to touch me and they can control me." So it speaks volumes to the puppy. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, the house line's on the puppy when it's loose, and I'm always supervising it. So there's no chance it's going to get all tangled or that, because I'm right there to untangle it if it does.
Absolutely.
So it is a safe thing to have the puppy dragging when he goes back in his crate. When I can't watch him, house line comes off, but it's handy. I use it outdoors too. I have a longer house line, depending on the length of my yard. Can I tell a funny story?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have another funny story from my early 20s. I had a Malinois.
I wish I knew early's 20s.
Oh, I was silly and crazy. I had a Belgian Malinois named Flyer, and I decided to let her out in the backyard. She was probably maybe 6 months old.
Okay.
So she had lost that puppy innocence and she was getting into her adolescence. So, at the beginning, they're like, they follow you around, they hang on your every word, and then they become teenagers and decide that, Christine knows nothing. I know way more than her. I'm a 6-month-old puppy. So, unbeknownst to me, Flyer had woken up at that age. And I let her out in the morning, and my husband and I were getting ready for work. And I went to bring her in so we could leave for work. And Flyer says, "No, I'm not coming back in the house."
Oh, dear.
Not coming back in. And she had no house line on, no long line. And I thought, I can't get this dog back in. And I remember we showed her treats, we showed her stuff, and she was, "No, I am not coming back in the house. I'm living the rest of my life out here as a wild creature, and that's that." And this is really embarrassing, but what we did was we propped open the back door. So we made the back door open, and then we each got a broom.
Oh, and did some herding and
we
some sweeping?
we kind of
curling for
like
a
we kind of, my husband went on one side, I went on the other. We held our brooms, and we kind of we didn't hit her or anything like that, of course, but we just used them to corral her and sweep her back into the house.
My goodness.
And we were late for work. Luckily, we both worked at the same place, so we always drove in together. We got to work, told our story. Everyone had a good laugh. And the next day, out came that house line.
Out came the house line.
And didn't look back after that. But just the fun, because we all do silly things. Absolutely. And we've all done silly things. No one's perfect. And,
no, of course not.
But, a good learning experience for me. And
absolutely.
Once we put the house line on and I recognized there was an issue, it's like, okay, now we're training. Now, yes.
Absolutely.
You've presented me a challenge and I'm up for it.
Yeah.
So problem solved right away.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. In a perfect world, we don't have that, that moment where we're late for work because our dog wouldn't come in the house.
Right, yes.
But, going right back to having the house line on is definitely the win in that situation.
I think all day it mulled over in my head,
goodness.
and I thought, I got home, and it's like I probably ate supper, looked after the dogs, and said, "We're doing some training."
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
Yeah, it never happened again.
We actually have house lines available for purchase at McCannDogs.com.
Short ones for inside the house.
Yeah,
yes,
nice house lines that are really light, but they're also very sturdy and strong. So if you're looking for something, you can check out McCannDogs.com and have a look at what we have in the store for those house lines. All right, getting used to a house line is so important, and I want to continue along that vein because I think that people assume that they can just throw a leash on a dog and that'll be fine as well. And a lot of the times leashes lead to dogs going, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this thing." All of a sudden, similar to what we were talking about when you take the collar and the dog's suddenly stuck and they have a little panic over it. Sometimes we put leashes on dogs and they go, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this when I feel it go tight, when I feel any sort of pressure." So I actually like to teach my young puppies what leash pressure means. And that is something that I'll basically use some food, and I basically will take the food and I'll lure, and as I'm luring, I just put a little bit of pressure onto that leash or onto the house line so that they feel this pressure on the back of their neck. It's very light pressure, and they feel that pressure as they're moving forward. So it starts to associate moving forward with that pressure. And then what I'll do is I'll flip the timing of that. So initially I have the food on their nose and the food basically does all the work. The house line is sort of a secondary feeling, or the pressure of the leash is sort of a secondary feeling. But then I switch that. So now they feel a little bit of pressure in the leash, and then I show them a piece of food and I lure them forward. So now the leash pressure starts to mean yield to it. It starts to mean move into that leash pressure because that's the expectation.
Right, yes.
And I never end up having a puppy who goes, "Oh my gosh," and like tries to pull at the end of the leash. I also think this is one of the nuanced behaviors. This helps me incredibly with leash respect and with teaching my dog not to pull on the leash, because they already have an understanding of what to do when they feel that leash pressure on their neck.
Yes.
Similarly, I'll do the same with placements and with leash pressure and placements. So I would do things, for example, like placing my dog into a sit as I'm doing a food lure. So they get used to my hand pushing on their rear a little bit so I can guide them into position. Or I might do push on the shoulders to lead them into the down position. I don't ever want my dog to panic over these things. And I don't want him to think that it's something aversive and confusing.
Right.
I want my dogs to understand that they just need to do whatever that pressure has dictated they do.
Yes.
So yield to the pressure on their shoulders or their rear, or yield to that leash pressure. And that's what your job is in that situation. And that clarity for them means that now I can use that to help them in other scenarios. I can use that to help guide a nice straight sit at my side, or I can use that to gently say, you must. If I'm working on downstays, for example, and my dog makes a mistake, I want to be able to fix that without it being a big aversive correction or a big fight with my dog. So having these things pre-taught, now I can go to my dog and I can remind him what he's supposed to be doing by just using a little bit of gentle pressure on the shoulders and basically insisting that he continues to remain in that down. And of course, that's further down the road for the dogs, but it starts as soon as they come home. It starts by helping them understand what these things are.
Yes, because your natural reaction is to pull against pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Opposition
often.
reflex.
Yes, and that puppies have that. So we want to teach them, give to the pressure, not fight against it.
Exactly. And to put that in perspective, if I were to walk up to any one of you and grab your shirt and pull on you, in all likelihood, 99% of you would pull back against me to try to balance yourself out and keep from falling over. And then, of course, if somebody's grabbing and pulling you, you want to fight against that because what's that person doing?
Right, yes.
But if you've learned that when I grab your shirt, I'm pulling you out of harm's way, for example, you're about to step out onto the street and there's traffic coming and I grab your shirt and pull you. If you have experience with understanding how to move with that pressure, your reaction is going to be very different.
It's like they tell you when someone goes to snatch your purse, your first reaction is to pull your purse back. But they say you can catch the purse snatcher off guard if you go with him.
Oh.
Because he doesn't expect you to go with you. And then you have that time to wrench it away from him or, give him a whack or something and get away from him.
Interesting.
Yes, they say go with the pressure to take them off guard.
Yeah, and it would. It would because like we just said, 99% of people are going to fight.
Right, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard that. Now I have a tip.
I think I learned it on Crime Stoppers.
You know what?
McGruff
That
the crime
makes
dog.
sense.
I think McGruff the crime dog taught me that.
Good old McGruff. Oh my goodness. Alrighty. So, sort of along the same lines would be handling. So we just talked briefly about putting some pressure on as we lure, for example, when we're doing sit placements, down placements, that sort of thing. We can also work on helping our dogs understand that touch from us is a good thing.
Yes.
And this is important to do when your puppies are really young because we want to condition them to just be cooperative and to let us do the things we need to do. We need to groom them. We need to trim their toenails. We need to check for burrs. We need to look in their mouths sometimes, right along the lines of teaching that out and drop it. I want to be able to reach in my dog's mouth, take anything out that I need to. I want to be able to clean their teeth if I need to. I want to be able to take things that might be stuck between their teeth
Or wipe their eyes. Especially with hairy dogs, we all have natural tears.
Yes.
And, dogs get that little bit of goo in their eyes when they wake up in the morning or maybe because of allergies.
Yeah.
And I remember helping out one of my friends at her boarding kennel and there was this little Shih Tzu and its eyes were caked with goo. And I thought, what has happened here? And I remember sitting down and trying to get this goo out of the dog's eyes. And as soon as I started to get the goo out, I realized why it was in there because the dog was snapping and snarling. And, I think all week when I was helping her out, every day I was getting a moist paper towel and trying to work at it.
Yeah.
And just to help the dog. So I thought this poor dog must be so uncomfortable with this goo in its eyes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so.
Well, and when dogs have that reaction, it's not because they're mean, nasty dogs. It's usually because they're a little bit frightened about whatever it is that's going on and they need some help. They need some guidance with that thing. So taking the time when they're young to introduce, and when we talk about handling, we don't just mean generalized touch. I spend lots of time touching and snuggling. I'm sure we all spend lots of time petting our dogs and telling them they're wonderful while we pet them. But that's a little bit different than what we're talking about when it comes to handling. This is very specific touch. It's very specific. When I want to be able to medicate my dog's eyes, their ears, when I want to be able to brush their teeth, when I want to be able to have the vet look in their eyes with the, the bright instrument and listen to this with their stethoscope and push on that and stick a finger in that and all of those things, I want to make sure that my puppy doesn't go, oh my gosh, this is frightening. And then they start to get defensive because that's what dogs do. They either fight or they flee. And if you're holding them in a situation where they can't flee, they're probably going to fight back. Yes. So then we end up with these, this dog's a biter and this dog's not. And that's too much of an oversimplification.
And for grooming a coated breed too, like my Chinese crested powder puff, I scissor his face. And I have scissors very close to his eyes. Yeah. I have, I scissor in around his groin. I don't want my dog to be... when I have sharp scissors, the last thing we need is them to be hopping around and panicking.
Absolutely.
I worked at veterinary emergency clinic, and I saw far more than people would expect. Dogs that came in with scissor wounds.
Oh my gosh!
People trying to cut mats out and actually cut their dogs. We saw it in cats and in rabbits too. But it happens.
I believe it.
It was a routine thing we saw in emergency. Yeah. And could you imagine being cut by scissors?
No.
Yes, just work with your dog.
Absolutely. Yes. And taking a couple of minutes, several times a week or even every day, a couple of minutes just to have a little handful of kibble, and you might reach in and just flip the dog's ear over and have a look. And then as you're touching, you're rewarding at the same time. So we develop these positive associations, or I like to play a game called open mouth insert cookie with my young puppies, where I get them used to the idea that I can pry open their mouth, and that means good things are coming because I'll open their mouth and then I'll have somebody toss in a cookie, or if they're well versed enough that I can open their mouth with one hand, which happens very quickly when they realize a cookie's going in, then I'll just do it on my own, where I'll open their mouth and then toss in the cookie myself.
I wish the dentist put something delicious in my mouth.
Wouldn't it be nicer to go to the dentist if you opened your mouth and you got a jube?
That would be
instead
awesome.
Instead of a water pick or
all that stuff they put in. Yeah, I get some sort of mouth cleaning jube that I eat, and
a mouth cleaning jube,
and then I leave the dentist happy.
There might be some fundamental flaws with the mouth cleaning jube, but I am so in if it ever gets invented.
You know what? I'm going to mention that to my son. He's in his third year at university, but I'm going to get him now to take on a whole new... I'm going to start him over again.
Make it his life's mission to come up with the teeth cleaning
jube.
We wouldn't even need to go to the dentist.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
We are...
we're on a roll.
Yes. Genius. All the dentists out there are going, oh my goodness. Don't let those get out.
Oh my gosh, don't let that idea get out.
We'll be out of work.
Yeah. So handling, so important. And I start it right off the bat with my puppy. And on that note, when we were talking about grooming, I also start an exercise called chin with my puppies right away. And just basically a chin rest. So what I do is I just cup my dog's chin with my hand. And then as I'm doing that, I reward them when I have the calm moments.
Yes.
And basically that gives me a skill over time. I build that skill, and it gives me a skill where I can just reach in. I can either take the collar to calm my dog, or I can put out my hand and say chin. And my dogs all know to come and put their chin in my hand. And that also means hold still.
Yes.
Because I've taken the time to reward the still behavior in that. So I'm not just holding their chin and as they're, wiggling around and wildly flailing, I'm feeding them cookies. I'm actually cupping their chin and letting them rest it in there. I don't actually hold their mouth. I just let them rest their chin in my palm. So initially I'm putting a little bit of pressure upwards to help them with that, but I wait for a moment of calm before I reward that thing. And they learn that the calm moments are when they get rewards. And then of course you just build that behavior out over time.
Yes. Yeah, I use that for face grooming.
Yeah.
Not me, my dog.
Well, maybe you should try it with you. I mean, you're kind of uneven in your face grooming there. So
I fight it.
Some of your beard is longer on this side. Okay. All right. This next one on my list is really important.
Okay.
And it is often something that gets confused, or we get worried about doing it, so then we don't do it for a long time, and then the puppies get used to this not being done. What do you think I'm talking about? You're making that face.
I don't know. Jumping up?
Oh, that's a good one too. But no, that's not the one that I was thinking of, but that's a good one too. This one's learning to be alone.
Oh, that's so important. Yes. Oh, this is one of our bees in our bonnets.
Yeah, bees in our bonnets. I didn't know I had any bees in my. I didn't even know I had a bonnet.
This is a bee in my bonnet sometimes. Yes. Yes.
It is so important.
Learning to be alone.
Yeah. Don't wait to leave them alone for short periods of time. It's sort of become this habit lately for people to think that they need to be with their puppy 24/7 and they can't leave their puppy alone, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Right,
this is important to start right away. And I don't mean like the instant your puppy comes home, you're going to abandon them for 8 hours. But when my puppies come home, I will make sure that I take some time to go and have a shower and leave the puppy in the crate. Sometimes they're going to make noise and sometimes they're not going to make noise. We have lots of videos and podcasts on crate training and ditching crate guilt, especially. The crate is such an important piece of equipment to help our dogs be safe, to help our dogs be confidently independent as well. So if we give them this safe space that they get accustomed to, this is their little den, this is their little spot. It also helps tremendously with house training. But this important piece of the puzzle, the last thing we want to do is be around for this solid period of time. And a lot of times people even take time off work in order to bring their puppies home, which is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes your life easier and you're going to be able to get organized and spend some time with the puppy. But you need to remember that it'll be huge culture shock for your puppy if all of a sudden you're just gone after being with them solidly for 2 weeks. So take the time that it takes in those, if you take 2 weeks off work, for example, to bring home a puppy, that's wonderful. But try to think about mimicking some of the time they're going to spend once you have to go back to work so that it's not culture shock for them. The first couple of days, leave the house and go and do some gardening outside. You'll be able to hear if your puppy's fussing, but really, a lot of times puppies are going to fuss in the crate, and our best tactic is to just ignore and let them settle in. And then at that point, you can reinforce in some way by either going and letting them out and having some, time with them, or leaving them to sleep. And that's reinforcing enough as well for a young puppy who needs lots of sleep. But spend little short spurts of time. Go and have a shower and leave the puppy. Go outside and do some gardening. Go and get some groceries from the store. Don't hover and spend all of your time with that puppy because they will need to get used to being alone. And a lot of times people inadvertently create more anxiety in the puppy by spending all that time with them and then suddenly disappearing versus having that time where they've gained some confident independence and they understand that being alone is not something that's terrifying for them. It is an adjustment. It definitely is an adjustment because they're probably coming from a situation where they had lots of litter mates and mom hanging around. And, if you've gotten your puppy from a breeder who was diligent, they probably had lots of activity in the home to help socialize these puppies at a young age, etc. So it is going to be a little bit of a change in their routine and in their understanding. And a lot of times that results in noise from the puppy. But it is normal, very, very normal for puppies to make noise. And it is definitely something that we might have to endure, but we want to be able to work through. So don't panic when you hear the noise and don't think you need to be with your puppy 24/7.
So I was speaking to one of our students yesterday and their puppy is acting up in the crate. And from talking to them, they aren't using the crate very often. So I said, well, the solution is to use the crate more often. And they were a little bit taken aback. And I said, you're going to put him in his crate and you're going to go grocery shopping. You're going to put him in his crate and go for a walk, just you and your husband. You don't need to. Someone doesn't always need to be home with this puppy.
Absolutely.
He needs to figure it out on his own, that he's safe by himself.
For sure. And on that note as well, put them in the crate when you are home.
Yes.
Because the last thing we want to do is for the crate to start to signify isolation. So we want to make sure that we have just a variety of crate time for the puppy. So not just overnight when they're sleeping and not just when we go out, but also when we are home, when we're busy in the house, when we're not. If you have a puppy that has FOMO, fear of missing out, and they're listening intently for you everywhere you are in the house, and anytime you make the slightest little noise, you hear them start to make noise, think about dampening that noise a little bit. So I like to cover my puppy's crates when I want them to just chill out and be on their own. Sometimes I like them to be in the thick of things and watching the action. And sometimes I like them to be just quiet and on their own. So I'll cover their crate with something that gives them a nice little den feel. I'll leave on some background noise. The McCann Dogs music channel is fabulous for this. So
Yes.
it's very rhythmic. It's got these tones that tend to relax. We did a lot of work and research with engineers and things like that to come up with this music. So it is set up to help your puppy relax and to help sort of lull them into a sleep. It's very repetitive, and we've been having tremendous success with that. So that's a great way of helping your dog settle as well.
Puppies need to sleep.
Yes.
When we have
tremendously.
when we have a toddler, we don't keep the toddler awake with us all day long. Could you imagine a cranky toddler? And that's what people do the opposite with their puppy. It's like, oh, well, let's keep the puppy awake all day and with us and blah, blah, blah. But
because it manifests as that extra energy, right? It comes out as the puppy being hyper. So people think that the puppy has too much energy and they need to take the energy down. But you're right in using the toddler analogy. It's the same thing where this toddler is like having a temper tantrum because they're desperately in need of sleep. So it seems to be more widely known with kids that they need a nap and that they're overtired. But sometimes that gets lost with puppies. So
and puppies need lots of sleep.
Yeah,
lots
absolutely.
of deep sleep. So don't skimp on that.
Yeah. How do people know if their puppy is overtired? What are some of the things they're going to see?
The puppy is nipping, just ornery, just like cranky, like just fights against you.
Cranky. Cranky
puppies. Yeah. Nobody likes a cranky puppy.
It's true. And how can people stay ahead of it?
By making sure they get adequate naps, naps and adequate mental exercise.
Yeah. And there's no formula. Every puppy is a little bit different. So this is one of the things, actually, I'm glad that we're talking about this because it leads me to this thought too, which isn't something I consciously, well, I guess it is something I consciously do, but it's not something I really consciously think about that often. But I will make notes about how long my puppy's been up and how that resulted. So if my puppy has been, we just had a, 35-minute training session and he only napped for 2 hours and he ate this much and he drank this much. If I have those details, then I can start to draw conclusions over time. So I can start to learn more about that puppy. So, and at that development period. So you know what? Yesterday he napped for 2 hours and then we had this 35-minute play, snuggle, hangout where he was up and about and busy. And it resulted in him being a little bit more frustrated with going back in the crate, a little bit more nippy with me. It resulted in him doing puppy burns. So, you know what? That was probably too long of a session out, maybe too short of a nap. So now today my puppies had a 3-hour nap and we had the same amount of time out to play and it was so much better. The puppy had that stick-to-itiveness and didn't have that ornery, that's a good word for it, that ornery puppy energy at the end of the play session. So that gives me great information about my puppy. So I need to make sure he's had at least 3 hours of nap, or maybe my play session needs to be 20 minutes instead of 35. And I can start to get ahead of these things. And the nice thing about getting ahead of these things is the rehearsal factor. So tell us about rehearsal. What is rehearsal?
Rehearsal is when our puppy does something over and over and we don't step in to stop the rehearsal.
Absolutely.
So they learn their play.
Yeah. It's the practice makes perfect, really.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what you're practicing, whatever you're practicing is going to get better. So if the puppy is practicing things like nipping and biting because they're overtired, and of course that's probably not something that we want our puppies practicing in most cases, then this is something that if we can impact on the puppy's energy by staying ahead of it, being proactive, we can then impact the rehearsal. And of course, some of these behaviors we really need to deal with and tackle head on, but some of these behaviors are going to get easier for us to tackle even head on if we have more information and we've set our puppy up in the best possible way.
Right.
So.
Yes. And along with rehearsal too is allowing puppies to do something that you would never allow the adult dog to do.
Yeah.
Because the puppies are rehearsing it as puppies, and then suddenly one day they're 6 months and you go, oh no, you can't do that anymore. That was only for puppies. And it's very confusing for the puppy.
Absolutely. And that's really that is in a nutshell so important. And I'm glad you said that because being proactive about things and helping our puppies understand that we're not going to change the rules midstream on them. We're not going to suddenly become unfair and say, well, you've been allowed to do that all this time, but now you're 50 pounds, so you can't jump up. That is such an important thing. And that will help with bonding. And that's the last thing I have on my list here is bonding. I spend a lot of time bonding with my puppy, which means I spend a lot of time trying to communicate with them. I don't leave them to their own devices. I don't let them get into mischief that I'm then telling them they're wrong for, because that's not a fun relationship and it sets up an adversarial relationship. So part of bonding is helping direct our dog's behavior. So when they're out of the crate, when they're really young baby puppies, before they understand any of the rules of the house, before they know how to sort of self-govern themselves, I will be directing their behavior 100%. And if I have to do something like step out of the room to get something from the laundry room, I'm coming up short with an example here, but say I want to go in the kitchen and just throw something in the garbage, and I have to step over a baby gate to do that. You know what? It gets more complicated because I don't want to step over that baby gate and have my puppy then learn that they should jump up on the baby gate waiting for me to come back from the other side. So I need to take the time to either put that thing aside where I'm going to put it in the garbage later, or I'm going to take my puppy, take the time it takes to put them in the crate, close the crate, make sure they're safe in there. Then I can go and deal with this thing I need to deal with. And then when I come back, I can let them out of the crate. I don't want to leave my puppy loose in that room because he might chew the carpet while I'm throwing that thing in the garbage. He might jump up on the baby gate and then learn to disrespect barriers, which of course causes me problems in the future. So I'd much rather tell my puppy what they should be doing rather than tell them that they're wrong, because they're making mistakes that are going to be natural mistakes for them to make.
And they're innocent. They don't know they're wrong.
Oh, they're so innocent and sweet. They're so wonderful. And it's so much more enjoyable to have our puppies in a proactive mode where we're showing them what we want them to do. And it also makes your training so much faster. If you have to come back from mistakes that you've made because your dogs have learned the wrong things to do, because you've been, loose and lax with the training efforts and the supervision early on in life, it really just makes your life harder in the long run. So trust us when we say, if you really buckle down for the first few months, you're going to have so much easier of a time with your puppy. So some of the things that we talked about today, hopefully they are now on your future training list. And on that note, I'm Instructor Shannon.
Instructor Swanny.
Happy training.
The McCann Dogs podcast is brought to you by McCann Professional Dog Trainers. We help dog owners to have a well-behaved, four-legged family member. Please give us a call at 905-659-1888 or visit us at mccanndogs.com. Happy training!